وأخذت الذين ظلموا الصيحة فأصبحوا في ديارهم جاثمين كأن لم يغنوا فيها ألا بعدا لمدين كما بعدت ثمود ولقد أرسلنا موسى بآياتنا وسلطان مبين إلى فرعون ملائه فاتبعوا أمر فرعون وما أمر فرعون برشيد يقدم قومه يوم القيامة فأوردهم النار وبئس الورد المورود وأتبعوا في هذه لعنة ويوم القيامة وأتبعوا في هذه لعنة ويوم القيامة بئس الرفد المرفود صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our efforts and amplify our reward in these last few days of the month of Safar, as we continue to remember the Prophet and his progeny, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'in. Continuing on reflections on the ayat of the Holy Quran, we are in Surah Hud, and as we mentioned before, Surah Hud is one of the surahs that are revealed in Mecca or prior to the migration to Medina, so it's considered Makkiyah, and it is one of the longer surahs that are Makki. So generally, the earlier chapters in the Quran were the shorter ones, and the chapters that were revealed in Medina, some of them were the longer ones, like Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-Imran, Surah Al-Ma'idah, and so on. However, amongst the longer surahs that were revealed prior to migration or prior to Hijrah to Medina, are these chapters, Yunus and Hud, ala nabina wa alayhi wa alayhim assalam. These chapters deal with the core principles or core beliefs of Islam, core teachings, most significantly, oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, confirmation of Tawheed, rejection of other, not just deities or gods, but also other systems. Some of the problems that often exist in human society are the fact that with introduction of multiple gods, they introduce the laws that are fabricated, some of the rules that they introduce in the society and attribute them to God or their gods. And these are the causes of problems, causes of oppression. Perhaps this is why shirk is considered ظلم عظيم, a great oppression. Result of shirk is oppression amongst humanity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need in any way, shape, or form, is not in need of worshippers, is not in need of our ibadah, and is not harmed by us not worshipping, or anyone not worshipping, or anyone ascribing partners for him. He is not affected. He is al-Ghani. However, what happens when people ascribe partners for God, it leads to a life of oppression, different ways of oppression towards one another. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, perhaps this is one of the reasons He considers shirk, ascribing partners for Him, as great oppression, ظلم عظيم. Therefore, in these chapters, we find rejection of God and or other gods besides the one God, and also the systems, all the rules that they fabricated and attributed to God, suggesting that this is what God said. In different chapters of that were revealed in Mecca, in fact, we find this theme. Another one is obviously the confirmation of the message and the messenger. So Quran being from God and the messenger being the messenger of God. And then examples of previous nations. We were in those examples and we reached up to the example of Nabiullah Shu'aib. Shu'aib ala nabina alayhi salam is one of the prophets that is considered to be Arabic speaking. We have a few of them. Salih is one of them, Shu'aib is one of them. And so they're considered amongst the Arabic speaking. Nothing to suggest that they are more important or better, or it's not about that. It's simply to signify in the early history of Islam, signify to those people who were addressed that these are basically these prophets were sent to your own ethnic group, your similar people to you that spoke your language. So people could relate, or the Arabs at the time could relate to those prophets and their nations. So it was closer to home, if you wish, that the concept. Similar to, and we have the example of the people of Lut. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, they're not far from you. You know, وَمَا قَوْمُ لُوطٍ وَمَا هُمْ عَنْكُمْ بِبَعِيدٍ. So they're not far. So distance-wise or time-wise, so you can relate better. This is important for us human beings to understand how we are connected, the relationship that we have with one another across the time. Okay, we affect each other not just in terms of people who live around us at our time, but also we affect each other with in terms of people who are humans before us or after us. there is an effect, there's an influence, and we should learn from each other, therefore. We learn from their mistakes and we avoid making the same mistakes, and we can bank on their good things and build from there. We can establish ourselves on, and I've said it many times to mu'mineen and mu'minat, if human beings have any good things in terms of medicine, technology, it's because we build upon each other. So we should build upon each other's achievements, generation after generation, so time and space connection. And also we should avoid the mistakes that they made so we don't make the same mistakes. The people of Shu'aib, they were very comfortable. Quran says in the words of Shu'aib, "Inni arakum ala khayr." I find you upon some goodness. So some of the tafsir, according to the riwayat, they had their prices were cheap. One of the good things that societies would have is when things are cheap for people to acquire, to purchase. Okay, so having cheaper prices, not having inflation like we have nowadays, or big inflation, being able to purchase things easily, that's a beautiful thing. However, the problem with human beings is that if they get attached, or if they do not detach rather from material things, nothing is enough. Having comfort and good prices and affordable things that they can purchase is not enough. They want more. And so they start oppressing each other. And that's literally what they did. He says to them, "Inni arakum ala khayr." I see that you're comfortable. So don't go ahead and deceive and cheat in your business transactions. أوفوا الكيل والميزان. When you weighing, putting things on the scale for the people to sell them, fulfill your duty in that regard. Give the right of the purchaser. When you're selling something, do not deceive. ولا تبخسوا الناس أشياءهم. When you're buying something, do not deceive either. Do not knock down their goods in order to get better prices, or underweigh when you purchase, overweigh when you sell. So this is a problem that they had, these people, the people of Shu'aib, known as the city of Madian. It seems to be on the way from the Arabian Peninsula towards Sham. According to the riwayat, that's where they live. And so they were not far distance-wise and time-wise, it seems. Time-wise, they were around the time of Nabiullah Musa alayhi salam. In fact, Shu'aib was a prophet at the same time as Nabiullah Musa alayhi salam. And he, in fact, married off his daughter to Musa alayhi salam. So his when Musa alayhi salam, when he went to Madian, he met the daughters of Shu'aib. He helped them out. Then they invited him. They told him, "Our father is inviting you to come home." He went to their home. Eventually, the contract was made, and he married one of the daughters of Shu'aib. So Musa alayhi salam, ala nabina wa alayhi salam, was married to one of the daughters of Shu'aib. So he was at the same time, in terms of the historically or timeline, he was at the same time as Nabiullah Musa alayhi salam. Now, what is exactly the timeline between Musa alayhi salam and our Prophet? There are different suggestions. It seems to be at least some 1,000 years or so, roughly about 1,000 years, because there's not roughly about 600 years between Nabiullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, our Prophet, and Isa alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And then from that back, there's about 500 years or so. Therefore, roughly about 1,000 years between. Now, why do I mention these numbers? when you say a thousand years, when I was young, we have some youngsters here. Yeah. If you say 1,000 years, how does it seem? To them, perhaps it seems like a very long time. It's like you can't even imagine. Yes. It's something. It's way far, too far. Yeah, 1,000. In fact, 100 years is too far. Yes. What about 10 years for a 2-year-old, 3-year-old? How does it feel? Yeah. 50 years for a 10-year-old. I want you to think about it. Everyone, when I say a 10-year-old or 12-year-old or thereabouts, how does 50 years seem to some of you? Yeah. So it's relative to each one and their age that those years may feel. Now, if I tell you that 50 years to me feels like 5 years, you'll be very surprised, yes? Now, if we look at it in terms of the history of mankind, what is 1,000 years? What is 500 years? What is 2,000 years? What is 1,400 years? So Karbala happened yesterday. Not too far, yes? If we look at things in this way, we realize the relationship that we have with one another and the effect we have on one another. Okay, those societies definitely affect us. So when Quran is giving these examples, God is not giving us stories for us to just narrate stories. Those stories are for us to learn lessons because we could do the same thing as those people. We could either choose to be like the people of Yunus, who sought forgiveness and were given abundance, forgiveness and abundance. God forgave them and gave them abundance and sent Yunus was sent back to them and more people. He was appointed to more people afterwards. Or like the people of Shu'aib, who can continue denying and defying and threatening. Amazingly, there are some words that were now in the days of Tabi'in, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. There are some words of Shu'aib alayhi salam, Prophet Shu'aib, that Imam Hussein alayhi salam used on the day of Ashura. Some ayat of the Quran in the words of Shu'aib alayhi salam that Imam Hussein alayhi salam used on the day of Ashura. Very, very beautiful use within his sermons and very applicable use in his sermons when he addressed his people. The people of Shu'aib continued denying and started threatening. There is some relationship here I want you to consider. The ayat we were up to, for those who were with us, or maybe it's been a few weeks, so a refresher, we were up to about ayah 92. In those ayat, the people threatened Shu'aib alayhi salam, and they said to him, قالوا يا شعيب ما نفقه كثيرا مما تقول. We, in 91, they said, we don't understand most of what you're saying. Now, what is that statement? We said that is a statement to suggest that it doesn't make sense. Okay? So they're not saying we don't understand as in we are the problem. No, most of what you're saying doesn't make sense. Why do they say that? So that they affect the general audience, the public around them. And then they said to him, وَإِنَّا لَنَرَاكَ فِينَا ضَعِيفًا. We find you very weak amongst us. Now, what is that statement meant to do? Consider, today we have similar things happening, in the world. And so consider the application. Quran doesn't use a single word without it being significant. There be a lesson in it. Quran collectively is hudan. Yes, collectively. In other words, every part of it is hudan. Every part of it is intended for guidance. So not a single word in the Quran can be dismissed or neglected because every part of it is for guidance. So when he says, or when they say to him, وَإِنَّا لَنَرَاكَ فِينَا ضَعِيفًا, we find you weak amongst us, there's an application to today's world and what happens today. Oftentimes, people justify, and that's what Muawiyah did, and that's what Yazid did, justify their position by suggesting that God made us strong. You know, if you, for those who believe, you believe in God, okay. God is the one who gave me power. If God didn't want me to have the power, I wouldn't have the power. And so when they're saying to Shu'aib, you are weak, who made you weak? From their perspective or in their argument, what they mean is that you're weak because God has made you weak. Similar to Qarun, we're coming to the story of Musa alayhi salam. At his time, Qarun suggested that God made him, he is favored by God, and Musa alayhi salam is not favored, therefore. One of the reasons why Musa alayhi salam said to God in his prayer, Ya Rabbi, you have given Qarun so much wealth. And through that, he's deceiving people. First, on the one hand, he says, I received it because I deserve it, or because I have the knowledge and so on. Okay. On the other hand, he uses the fact that he has it and Musa doesn't have it as him being favored. And this is the same argument here. You're weak amongst us. Yeah. That's also, or could be also, a threat, blackmail, warning. Initial blackmail to the continuation of the ayah clearly says it. They say to him, we find you weak amongst us. And what else? وَلَوْلَا رَحْتُكَ لَرَجَمْنَاكَ. If it wasn't for your family, we would stone you, kill you in a brutal manner, stone. If it wasn't for your family. Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala. What did he have that the people suggested in some cases that maybe we should not do what we're doing? Some of them. Also the family, yes? Being related to the Prophet ﷺ, the family aspect. So this is one of the similarities, رَبْطُكِ. Then he says, they continue to tell him through their warnings, وَمَا أَنْتَ عَلَيْنَا بِعَزِيزٍ. You are not of a great position or value or status for us. We would, in other words, if you don't stop what you're doing, we will harm you. We will stone. This is a threat, yes? In other ayat, we have a similar response, but here his response is this. He said to them, ayah 92, قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ أَرَهْتِي أَعَزُّ عَلَيْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ. This is important, listen. My people, first my people. He still addresses them with my people, connecting with them, yeah? Then he says, my family is more significant to you than God. Consider God. My family versus, you're saying, وَلَوْلَا رَحْتُكَ لَرَجَمْنِكَ. What about God? Do you consider God in the equation? Is he in any part of the equation? Most of us, this is something I find very common in our communities. Most of us, our considerations of people and how we treat them are material, based on material things. Respecting certain people because they have the numbers, okay? In communities, even Islamic communities, yeah. Not just politicians and their elections. That is a problem in itself. Politicians in their elections, they appease people based on numbers because they need the numbers, yeah? What about in Islamic centers? People have or put more significance oftentimes to certain members because of their numbers. This family, they have so many. As I'm saying it, I'm sure you know what I'm, or your mind goes to certain names, and yeah, they have so many people that they come from the same city, or they come from the same family, or they're siblings with multiple children, and therefore they have the numbers. If they leave, half of our audience are gone. Yeah, many centers have this issue. What about the consideration of God? This is literally what the Quran is saying. He says, Arahti, my family is more significant to you than God. Arahti a'azzu alaykum min Allah, وَاتَّخَذْتُمُوهُ وَرَاءَكُمْ ظَهْرِيًّا. Therefore, you consider God, you have put God behind your minds, in the back of your minds, behind your backs, in the back of your minds, not giving much attention or significance. ظهرية comes from ظهر, the back. You have considered God وراءكم, behind you, and ظهرية, وراءكم and ظهرية, behind you and giving your back. So little attention to God, so much attention to material things. And I said two things people pay attention to. Yes? One is numbers in terms of human numbers. The other is also numbers in terms of money. Subhanallah. Very sad. Our assessment of people, or assessment of situations rather, is based on people and money. If somebody has numbers behind him, his vote or his voice counts. No numbers, one of those two numbers, yeah? Human numbers or financial numbers. If there's no numbers, no significance. I have seen that time and time, again and again, and we need to grow up. We need to have rushd. In these ayat, we have the concept of rushd repeated. It's coming up, in fact. Mature. Maturing as believers means considering God before any other consideration. Any other consideration. Ethnic consideration, family consideration, numbers, in terms of human numbers or financials. None of these should be counted or accounted for when we're making our decisions and we're trying to assess situations. What we need to focus on is Rida Allah, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a great lesson that we should be learning from this ayah, ayah 92. وَاتَّخَذْتُمُوهُ وَرَاءَكُمْ ظَهْرِيًّا. And then he says, amazing, إِنَّ رَبِّي بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ مُحِيطٌ. My Lord surely is encompassing of all that you're doing. Sees it? No. He doesn't say basir. In one statement he could say basir. Yes? What is the difference here? Muhit obviously sees it as well. But what? Any suggestions? Encompassing rather than seeing. My Lord is encompassing or is surrounding everything that you're doing. بما تعملون محيط. Why didn't he say basir? Any suggestions? He sees. محيط basir. Why? Basir, seeing. In this case, محيط is control, sand. Yeah, with control. Okay, so he has control over it. In other words, you may have some consideration of the situation because of numbers and whatever else. However, all of that could change. Qarun, what happened to his wealth? Got swallowed. Yes? خَسَفْنَا بِهِ وَبِدَارِهِ. Him and his house. And all of his wealth with him. There are people still digging for his wealth. So this is the beauty of the terminology used in the Quran. Every term has many levels of guidance. إن ربي بما تعملون محيط. He sees it all. It's all accounted for. And he has the power to make you face the consequences here or in the hereafter, or both. In some cases, we face the circumstance or the consequences here and in the hereafter. In some cases, it's here. In some cases, it's left for the hereafter. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not leave it until then. However, we don't ask for him to punish us here either. There's a man that at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Allahumma salli ala. He, in fact, was suggesting in his prayer, Ya Allah, punish me here before the hereafter. So the Prophet said, you have asked for the wrong thing. Why have you undermined the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Say, forgive me. Seek forgiveness. Why are you asking to be punished here before the hereafter? So we seek forgiveness. We seek forgiveness and ask for him to deal with us with his mercy, inshallah. The next ayah 93. وَيَا قَوْمِ اعْمَلُوا عَلَى مَكَانَتِكُمْ إِنِّي عَامِلٌ. This is a response. Similar, again, we are speaking of Nabiullah Shu'aib, but in the days of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So consider what Imam Hussein alayhi salam said on the day of Ashura to his people. He did not fear them, and similarly, you hear from Nabiullah Shu'aib. He's not fearful of his people. They can say we're weak, we're strong, you're weak. They can say that we're going to harm you, stone you. They can say whatever they want to say. He says to them, do ala upon your makanatikum. Makanatikum comes from makana is status, okay? But also has the meaning of power in it, okay? So having status and power, the ability to do something, okay? Makkinni or makkanna lahu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this term about some of his messengers when he gave them the ability, the power. وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا يُوسُفَ. Nabiullah Yusuf was given the power and status, makana. So, اعملوا على مكانتكم. He says to them, act upon the status that you have, the power that you have. Meaning, I'm not worried, I'm not fearful of you. You say you have power, do whatever you have in mind and what you want to do, and I will do inni amil, I will act. In other words, I will not stop guiding and reminding. You threaten me, you tell me if you don't quit what you're doing, we're going to stone you. I will continue doing what I have to do to please God, and I'm not worried about you. If you recall in the early sermon of Imam Hussein alayhi salam on the day of Ashura, he said to his people, to the people facing him after all the reminders, he said, if you do not want to consider my statements, my reminders, and you decide or you have decided to harm me, فَمَقْدُوا إِلَيَّ وَلَا تُنْظُرُونَ. Make your decision and do not even give me any time or respite. When the ladies heard that, they were crying because they realized that they are in a weaker position and the army of the enemy is greater. And the Imam sent Abu al-Fadl and Ali al-Akbar to say, it's okay, calm them down, it's not the time. This is how the prophets and the Imams respond to threats when they're fulfilling their duty. They're not worried. اعملوا على مكانتكم إني عامل. I will act, I will do whatever pleases God, regardless of what you do. I'm not worried, I'm not fearful, I'm not scared of your responses. So he says to them, قال يا قوم اعملوا على مكانتكم إني عامل سوف تعلمون. You will know. سوف is a little bit different to sa, both meaning will in Arabic. However, sa is suggested to be quicker, سوف is suggested to be slower or may take longer. Both about something will happen in the future. So what he's saying is you will eventually know. سوف تعلمون من يأتيه عذاب يخزيه ومن هو كاذب. You will shortly or soon you will know who is the one who will face the humiliating torment. Who will be humiliated. Now why سوف? In many cases when the prophets told their people that if you continue on this path, you will face the consequences of your actions. You will face a torment from God that He would allow. In many cases, people question, where is it? وَيَقُولُونَ مَتَى هَذَا الْوَعْدُ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. They often told their messengers, when is this promise if you're telling the truth? So here, using Sawfa is telling them, you may not see the signs, but it's coming. Okay, it is coming, not as immediate as in something that you are seeing the signs of. In many cases, people at the time, like the people of Nuh alayhi salam, at this time, they were living their lives. There was absolutely nothing wrong. Everything was beautiful. Everything was perfect. From their perspective, they didn't think that there was anything wrong. The elite were oppressing the weak. I'm not suggesting that there was fairness and justice in their society. If that was the case, God would not have destroyed them. Let us make this very clear. There are statements derived from a hadith that kingdom remains with lack of faith, kufr, but will not remain with oppression. الملك يبقى مع الكفر ولا يبقى مع الظلم. Meaning what? If they were fair to each other and denied God, they were living fairly, no oppression, they would not have been harmed. What brings about rebelliousness from nature against the people is when they rebel against God's system, when they oppress each other. Therefore, Quran says, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. All the mischief, trouble that you see on earth, land, and the ocean is appearing because of the earnings of people's hands. What people are doing, either directly or as a natural consequence. Directly means what? You know, today we are, perhaps because of our greed, we are multiplying animals in ways that are not natural, dealing with nature in ways that are harmful to nature, doing all sorts of things because we just want takathur, multiplication, increase, and nothing is enough. Quran says through the words of Shu'aib alayhi salam, inni arakum ala khayr. You're living comfortably. Why do you want more? Why do you have to deceive and use all sorts of deceptive methods in order to increase and have more, or more power, more wealth, and so on? So essentially, either directly or indirectly, all the things that are happening are the results of people's, or all the evil things that are happening on earth are the results of people's actions or inactions in some cases. He says, وَيَا قَوْمِ اعْمَلُوا عَلَى مَكَانَتِكُمْ إِنِّي عَامِلٌ سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ مَنْ يَأْتِيهِ عَذَابٌ يُخْزِيهِ. And when the torment comes, what happens to the liar? The one who defiantly or continued to defy the prophets and their orders and God's commands and suggested that they are the strong ones and the prophet was the weak one. What happens at that point? They are humiliated. That's khizr. In itself, that is khizr. In itself, that is humiliation. Plus, the method in which they are removed is often humiliating. And often it is related to what they did. Often it's related to even their method of oppression or what they were proud of. An example, Fir'aun, he says, the river flows for me and I'm the greatest God. إني ربكم أنا ربكم الأعلى. He says, هذه الأنهار, these rivers flow for me. I am your greatest God. What destroyed him? The water. It was so similarly, if they were attached to wealth so much, which is what? All the material things, gold and whatever else, yes? Which is, you know, how do they mine gold? Any suggestion? Gold mines, what is it? From earth. From earth, they dig out from the dust and dirt and get the gold. So that gold, essentially, in its source, could be what destroyed them. أمطرنا عليهم حجارة. Those stones came upon them like rain and destroyed them. So often it's a reminder that you were so attached to those things, you considered them your source of the beauty in your life and the goodness in your life, dismissed God, and those things became the reason or the way or the method of your destruction. We seek refuge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from that. And so he says, وَمَنْ هُوَ كَاذِبٌ, you will know who is going to face the torment and who is the liar. Because when the punishment comes, then the liar is clear. Until then, they say, you're the weak one, we are favored by God, we're in a better position, you're lying. Often they accuse prophets of what? Lying. What is the claim of a prophet that people accuse him of lying? That they're prophets, that they've been revealed to from God, that they're connected to God. And the response is what? You're lying, you don't. Oftentimes, they would say, if you received it, we should receive it too. If God spoke to anybody, why didn't he speak to us? Okay. So this is continuous. We find today some people purify. They become pure, that they are in a position where God inspires them, not wahi as in revelation of Quran or wahi as in prophecy of prophethood, but inspirations. Okay. And sometimes some of us average people, we would question them or consider ourselves in that position that I'm also receiving. We sometimes mistake the satanic whispering with divine inspiration. This is very common, by the way. Okay, so be careful until we purify and get to a status. Let's not confuse the two. When shaitan is whispering to us versus when we are receiving wahi or inspiration, ilham from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَارْتَقِبُوا إِنِّي مَعَكُمْ رَقِيبٌ. Irtaqibu is a way of waiting while watching. Okay, so it's a little bit difficult to translate often because we don't have those terms in English. Okay, ارتقبوا is to wait, but in like watch what's going to happen. Okay, wait and watch at the same time. So basically, he's saying to them, wait and watch what's going to happen, and I will also watch. إني معكم رقيب. I am with you, watching. Why did he use those statements? So one statement, the initial statement, اعملوا على مكانتكم إني عامل. You act, I act. You act based on what you're saying and your power and your threats to me. I will act on what God has guided me and revealed to me. Okay. Then he says, سوف تعلمون ما يأتيه عذاب يخزيه ومن هو كاذب. You will know who is going to be tormented, who is the liar. And then he says, وارتقبوا إني معكم رقيب. Why? Those are reminders. Another chance. Consider. Think about what I'm saying to you. Okay. Look at previous nations. Again, Quran did not share with us every single word that he said to his people. Okay, just a brief description of the overall conversation. However, if you were to consider his reminders to his people, if you were to consider his reminders to his people, you will find that this is another reminder. He is also one more time giving them another chance through care. Messengers of God are never lacking love or care for their people. And if we want to guide people, we have to love and care for them. You cannot be judgmental or dismissive and exclusive, excluding people, dismissing people, having hatred for them, and wish to guide them. That doesn't work. Messengers of God and people who follow them, they consider the people their own. Ya qawmi. Today, if you live in this part of the world, your neighbors are your people. That's how you should look at them. Your neighbors are your people. God appointed you to them. How do you treat them? Do you judge them and exclude them from the mercy of God? They do these things, they live this kind of lifestyle, therefore they're completely excluded from the mercy of God, and therefore there's nothing I could do for them or help them with? Or do we try and first understand that they are in a different position than we are? They were born in a different environment, different family. As a result, they're in that lifestyle and they're in that mentality, ideology that they're in. Therefore, the feelings or emotions are emotions of understanding. I'm not saying accepting what they do, but understanding. And then the decision should be how, or the consideration should be, how can I help? And the decision should be, I want to help them, or I will help them. I will remind them in whichever way we can. This is the method or the way of the Anbiya, the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to develop that. وَارْتَقِبُوا إِنِّي مَعَكُمْ رَقِيبٌ. I'm with you. He doesn't exclude them. That term, ma'akum, is an amazing term. وَارْتَقِبُوا. Wait, watch for what's going to happen. I am with you, also watching. So within the statement, there is tahdeed and wa'id. There is promise and warning. There is bashir and nadir within the same statement. Inni ma'akum, I'm with you, but I'm also watching for what could happen. In other words, if you continue doing the things that you're doing, defying what I promised you will happen, and you'll watch it, and I'll watch it too. But I'm with you. In other words, if you decide to change, I will help you along the way. How can you even avert punishment or the torment or the consequences of your actions? إني معكم رقيب. آية 94. Any comments before we go to the next ayah? Questions, comments? If not, we'll continue. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The next ayah, ayah 94, is when it was over for them. For these people, time is up. They did not pay any heed. They did not show any remorse, did not change. Therefore, the command came. And remember, we said in the previous ayah, سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ, meaning they had a chance. Will, with a little bit of a delay. Okay? In other words, they had a chance. They could have changed. They could have done things differently. It's not like it was done. That's it. They had no chances whatsoever. If you recall, we said even with the people of Nabiullah Yunus, the torment was on its way. They saw the signs of it. Until then, they had a chance. They used their opportunity, and therefore they were saved. Until the signs of the torment came. Amongst them was a scholar. There's a very nice story and analogy at their time of a worshipper versus a scholar. The worshipper of their time, one who was known to worship God so much, was unable to help them and said, it's over, you're doomed, it's over, it's done. I can see the signs, it's done. What Yunus, what he was saying is true, and now it's coming, and there's nothing you could do about it. On the other hand, the alim of their time, the scholar of their time, he told them, no, it's not over. Though the signs are there, if you collectively come together and seek forgiveness, you will be saved. Here in the ayah 93, he says, سَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ, you will see, or you will know in the future. But there is a chance. And remember we said, إِنِّي مَعَكُمْ رَقِيب is alluding to that chance. I am with you, watching. Watching for the consequence or for any change, because he has already told his people, if you return God, you will find لَوَجَدُ اللَّهَ تَوَّابًا رَحِيمًا. You return to God and go to his messenger, and the gate is the messenger. وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ جَاءُوكَ. Return to God, you go to his messenger. Not return to God and deny his messenger. It doesn't work. Okay. Return to God and deny the Imam of the time. It doesn't work. If you know him, you don't deny him. So here, he says, I'm with you. وَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا, when there was no change from their end, the promises he gave them, they did not use any opportunity of return. Instead, they continued on their way. Therefore, the torment came. وَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا نَجَّيْنَا شُعَيْبًا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ. This is one of the most beautiful ayat in how God protects the believers. If it's not for God's protection, could we live a minute in this life? It can happen. Yeah. It's all through his protection. This is a reminder of that. Our command came. He says, وَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا, and when our command came. The command as in the formative level, that oppression has a certain consequence. So the command came. The protection is no longer there for these people. However, before God says what happened to those who were no longer protected, he spoke of those who were protected and how he saved them. يَا مَنْ رَحْمَتُهُ سَبَقَتْ غَضَبَهُ. His mercy before his wrath. He says, وَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا نَجَّيْنَا شُعَيْبًا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ. We saved Shu'ayb and those who believed with him through a mercy, بِرَحْمَةٍ مِنَّا. So the command came, he had to protect the believers. Now let's consider the command and the wrath or the consequences, if you want to call it punishment, torment. Is it the primary thing or a secondary thing? Secondary. God is always protecting everyone. Now for these people, his protection is removed. And those are maintained under his protection. You see? So it's the consequence of their own actions. It has nothing to do with lacking mercy or God not wanting to be merciful. That cannot be the case ever. His mercy is always there. However, the protection based on the way he has set the world, set the universe, set the laws, his traditions, his sunnah, his protection from those people is removed, or they rejected it rather. They repelled it, therefore they became subjects of that command. وَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا نَجَّيْنَا شُعَيْبًا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ بِرَحْمَةٍ مِنَّا. Through our mercy. And what happened to those who did not believe and they oppressed? وَأَخَذَتِ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا الصَّيْحَةَ. Remember ظَلَمُوا we said. It's about ظلم. Not أَخَذَتِ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. No, ظَلَمُوا. God allowed them to face the consequences of their actions and what nature did to them because of their zulm, their oppression. They could deny. When they oppress is what the problem happens. وَأَخَذَتِ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا الصَّيْحَةَ. Sayha is from, it's more like a loud sound. It could be made from individuals. It could be, in this case, an angel. It could be a sound as a result of a natural thing. Sometimes you hear, for instance, if a volcano erupts, you have a sound of an explosion. Yes? Sounds that, the sound blast that the fighter jets do. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that, experienced that. I have many times. Living in or growing up in Lebanon, especially in South Lebanon, we used to experience that every now and then. It literally, if they do it near here, you think there was an explosion, and every glass would break. No glass would remain. Literally, if it's close enough, it could kill, because it would basically pierce the eardrums and the middle ear and so on. And basically, people could start bleeding right then and there, either deafness or even death. So it depends, I guess, how close or how far. So sometimes they get closer to buildings, and it causes so many damage. I mean, so much damage, and so many people. I mean, people get injured and so on. In any case, so sayha, a sound, is capable of destroying lives even. وَأَخَذَتِ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا الصَّيْحَةَ فَأَصْبَحُوا فِي دِيَارِهِمْ جَاثِمِينَ. The next thing is in their own home where they lived. Okay, it's like nothing happened, but in their own home they were basically in a still position. no more movers. Okay. Jathimi, it could be also uh, um, basically a position of that at that point having some regret, therefore in a begging position. So there's also that possible meaning. The typical translations, I think they just I don't know what they translate or mostly translate Jathimin as, but I've seen translation as like um, still or fallen,
Still.
lifeless, fallen still, okay, yeah, prone. So basically, it's just the way they are in terms of a physical position at the time. However, it may have to do with someone in a position of desperation. Okay, so they're before uh, they they heard it coming, and so that reference of سوف تعلمون, you will know. He's suggesting that you will know here. He told them in the previous ayah that you will know who is the one who will face the torment and who is the liar. So in other words, you will know here. They knew it's coming. And so they were in a specific position when it happened. All of them in that position, which is the position of somebody who is humbling themselves to their gods, to God or whatever. But when it was too late. If the punishment comes and it's happening already, it is too late. We said Yunus ala nabina wa alayhi salam, his people saw the signs. The difference is, one, they saw the signs, they averted the punishment by seeking forgiveness. These people, they did not change until it came. There was no longer just the signs of it. It came. Perhaps they watched some die right in front of them. Perhaps they saw some maybe creatures dying as a result. So they saw it happening. They knew it's happening. It was no longer a threat or something they're warned about. It's happening, and therefore they were in that position, but it was too late for them. Same as the Pharaoh in his last moments, he said what? I believe. Yes. But it was too late for him. It was said to him, now, after all these time, the chances, not just time as in like a long time, but so many chances or so many miracles that you witnessed. آيات. ولقد أرسلنا موسى إلى قومه بتسع آيات. 9 signs, 9 miracles he witnessed from Musa على نبينا وعليه السلام. Yet they continued to deny, therefore it was too late for them. في ديارهم جاثمين. The next ayah 95, he says كأن لم يغنوا فيها ألا بعدا لمدين كما بعدت ثمود. As if they were not ever prosperous. Ghina is needlessness. Okay, to not need. Ghani is to be needless. Yaghnaw comes from that same root, meaning feeling needless, having sufficiency, having what they need. Okay. At that point, كَأَن لَمْ يَغْنَوْا. Now all the wealth that they had and all the comfort that they had, everything was going fine for them. No drought, okay, no basically lack of vegetation or food. Okay. Everything was fine. Water is there, food is there, wealth is there, everything is good. All of a sudden, a sound, maybe it could have been a lightning, okay, a lightning that the sound of it was enough to finish them. Okay, you look at them, it's like, what are they missing? What is the problem? كأن لم يغنوا فيها. As if they were not prosperous and needless in it. ألا بعدا Ala, we said it's an expression to announce, okay, to get people's attention because you want to make an announcement. Comes from there are two words in it. Istifham, meaning a question, did something, did, or, and the other one is la, no, did not, okay? But it's an expression to get the attention. Ala bu'dan. It's also, it could be emphasis that far, bu'd from far, yeah? Bu'dan لمدين كما بعدت ثمود. Far is Madian. Far in what sense? Distance? No, far from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This bu'dan is similar to la'na. Okay? La'na is deprivation from the mercy, and bu'd is far from the mercy. Okay, similar. Ala bu'dan limadyana kama ba'idat, like, just like, kama, just like, Thamud was also far from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? So the previous example was given, and now another example. Why did he say Ala bu'dan li Madyana? Could have been the end. Why kama ba'idat Thamud? Any suggestions? By the way, I want to share this since we're speaking of suggestions. Is it okay to make suggestions about the meaning in the Quran? Yeah, the meaning, the tafsir. Is it okay to think of a suggestion or something, reflect on it, think of suggestion?
Yeah.
Huh? I was visiting one city this Muharram actually, and this came up. Some were very unhappy with the situation that they were facing, and some were defending the situation. So they had a group that initially they had a scholar who was helping them with tafsir, and then he left the city. He was no longer with them. And so they continued the tafsir sessions, one of them leading it, who was not a scholar, but they were reading tafsir books and having discussions and conversation. So some were saying, this is a problem. If you don't have the knowledge, you're making assumptions and so on. Others were saying it's okay, we're just making suggestions. We're not saying that this is the meaning and nothing else. And so it was kind of a debate in that community. So I thought it's good to bring it up here. Things like that may occur to us, and maybe a question that we would face at some point. It's good to have a good understanding of the situation. Suggesting a tafsir and that this is it and nothing else of the Quran without knowledge is not allowed, full stop. Okay? Suggesting possible meanings that may be given or through the ayat without any kind of confirmation that we feel like this is it, and also clarifying that when we're making suggestions, the audience also have to understand that this is a possibility. In general, it's okay. In general, there are situations it's not okay, especially when our suggestion is against the meanings that are given through the ayat or through riwayat, opposing those. I'll give you an example. There are some ayat about, for instance, polygamy. Okay, the ayat about this particular subject may suggest on the surface that you are not to do it. Okay, based on the fact that some ayat says, one ayah says you have to be just, another ayah says you cannot be just. And often I have people who conclude based on those two without proper understanding of the first one or proper understanding of the second one. They suggest that it's not permissible. So then you tell them, okay, what happens to all these ayat, all these ahadith, Okay, now let's look at the ayat on surface and not go deeper into them. What happens to all the ahadith and the practice of the ma'sumin and the practice of the people around them and the taqreer, the expression of the ma'sumin? Taqreer is their reaction to what happened around them. Okay, did they ever condemn somebody, for instance, on something? That would be their taqreer, that would be their reaction or expression. So what happens to all this? We don't know any of that, and we draw that conclusion, for example. That's a problem. There are other instances that people just draw. You know, the fishing is halal for you. Okay, some people might say, well, that means everything in the that is actually a big group of Muslims who believe that everything in the ocean is halal because of that ayah. Okay, they have no idea of what we call general and specific ayat. Okay, aam and khas, the context of the ayat. Why did that ayah start with أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ صَيْدُ الْبَحْرِ وَحُرِّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ صَيْدُ الْبَرِّ? After it says, and it's haram for you to hunt in there. It's halal for you to fish in the ocean. It's haram for you to hunt in the land. مَا دُمْتُمْ حُرُمًا, as long as you are in ihram. It's a context of ihram. So dismissing all of that, we just take that surface. So if somebody was to give suggestions in a way that the audience are taking it as a ruling, okay, or as a definitive tafsir of the ayat, there's a problem, okay. But if somebody is saying, okay, these are the ayat, and this could be a meaning of it, based on what I'm reading in tafsir, based on what I'm understanding from the surface of the ayah, and what I'm suggesting is not contradicting rules and other ayat and the ahkam and the ahadith, it's not contradicting that, then it's okay to give the suggestions and not make it as the definitive tafsir. Yeah, inshallah, clear on this. Yes.
And the other ayat.
Yes, so to have a proper tafsir, you have to have a proper tafsir. There's a book that is available on alislam.org. It is from the work of Allah, Sheikh Jafar Subhan, one of the Maraja from today. It's called Introduction to the Exegesis of the Holy Quran. If you look it up, you'll find it. It's a very relatively short read. You can read it in a few days. And it's pretty informative in terms of what does one need to do tafsir. And therefore we understand how does the mufassir, how do our scholars do tafsir. And also we understand our limitations. Therefore our suggestions could be far from or closer to, and their suggestions, and as long as we keep it in that, okay, we might be okay as long as we don't get into something that is contradicting and so on. But yeah, it could be very far, it could be closer based on the use of those preconditions or prerequisites of tafsir. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, he has 14 preconditions. Understanding Arabic, obviously, the history and the variations of the Arabic terminology from the time and today, because a lot of the words changed. The context of the revelation, Sha'n Nuzul, also 14 conditions he considers, for instance, the riwayat in that regard, the ayat in that regard, and some other conditions that are important to have a full understanding of the early history of Islam, not just Sha'n Nuzul, overall the history. Okay, so also that matters, like what we were discussing, the Medina and Mecca, therefore Madani and Mecki and the difference, a good understanding of all that. So ihata overall of the ayat, the different ayat, when we're doing a tafsir of a certain subject, we have to have a good understanding of the rest of the ayat speaking of the same subject. Although our older mufassirin, older tafsir books do not, they don't have subject-based tafsir. It's more of a new concept. The older tafsir are in the order, in the compilation order of the Quran. However, when they did their tafsir, within the compilation order tafsir, within that they also did, like Allama Tabatabai, for example, he also did a tafsir al-mawdu'i, which is based on the subject. So when he came to the first time he comes to a term like Rahman or something, then he brings all the ayat and other so on that subject he has a good focus on it. And then as he goes on, another subject comes up, he also has a good focus on it, which is what we call tafsir mawdu', based on the subject-based tafsir. I think that inshallah we will pause here and we'll start with I think we got to the story of Nabiullah Musa. We'll start on that from the next session, coming session, inshallah. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله.